In this episode, we are going to discuss the topic of substance abuse trusts. This topic, more broadly, is very close to my heart. As a kid, I grew up in the 90s and into the early 2000s when opioids were freely prescribed, and other prescription drugs as well, for simple ailments, broken bones, simple dental procedures. For example, when I had my wisdom teeth out, I was prescribed Percocet. And what emerged from that was an opioid epidemic. And I'm not specifically talking in this video about opioid addiction. This could be alcohol, it could be other prescription drugs or other controlled substances. But the reality that many families face is we have people in our lives that are very close to us that unfortunately suffer from these disorders. And in the estate planning context, we have to account for that. And so a substance abuse trust is generally designed to avoid making an outright distribution to a beneficiary who is suffering from active addiction or who may be at risk of relapse. Before we dive into this topic, I want to give credit. A lot of the information that we're going to discuss in this episode was inspired by an attorney named Martin Hagan, and on his website, haganlaw.net, that's HAGANLAW.net, and I'll put a link to his website below. There is a ton of information, a wealth of information on this subject, and so we're going to do kind of a broad overview of a lot of information that was inspired from him. What Attorney Hagan has done is he worked directly with addiction specialists to really understand the best way to structure this kind of a trust. And he came up with what's called the recovery-based model. And this is the idea that you address the addiction head on. You don't hide from it. You don't take a pot of money and hide it. You don't use it as a punishment, but rather address the issue head on. And in that way, you can use this trust to encourage and to empower your beneficiary to work with the trustee in an effort to address their underlying addiction. So just as a quick summary of the purpose of a trust, this is, again, in this instance especially, a way to avoid a outright distribution going to a beneficiary. So instead, you're putting an asset or assets into a trust, and the purpose of it is to kind of outline under what conditions you feel comfortable making distributions. So generally speaking, a trust has a settlor or a grantor. That's the person who's establishing the trust. You have a trustee. That's the person who's controlling the trust. And the beneficiary is the person who's receiving the benefit from the trust. And the trust document is kind of like the rule book. It outlines all of the rules and perhaps the purpose of the trust, which is where we're going to start in this instance. Attorney Hagan recommends that you be very clear in a substance abuse trust about its purpose. And so I'm going to refer directly to his website because I think it has an excellent example of how you can kind of set the stage for a substance abuse trust. So this is an example of a statement of purpose in creating the trust. The example is a parent's expression of her reasons for establishing a substance abuse trust for her daughter, who in this case is named Sabrina. She writes, "My reason for creating this trust comes from the fact that for the past several years, my daughter Sabrina has been coping with an addiction to opioids that has seriously impaired her ability to engage in gainful activities or to responsibly manage money. I believe that Sabrina may also have an undiagnosed mental health problem that contributes to her addiction. While these conditions may continue indefinitely, I am committed to encouraging and empowering Sabrina to seek treatment in the hope that she will achieve as complete a recovery as possible. I want this trust to provide for the continuation of my efforts in the event of my later incapacity or death." A substance abuse trust can be used to address different phases of addiction. For example, The trust may allow for distributions when the beneficiary is actively seeking or pursuing treatment and recovery. The trust may limit the use of trust assets to paying for expenses related to carrying out a treatment plan that has been established for the beneficiary with the assistance of treatment specialists. And finally, you can address the recovery phase, setting constraints around under what conditions you feel comfortable making distributions directly to a person who has suffered from a substance abuse disorder. So for example, the trust document can give discretion to the trustee to make distributions directly to the beneficiary if the beneficiary is able to establish a period of sobriety. For example, you could require that the beneficiary pass drug tests, or that they be in counseling or other evidence of stability in their life. A substance abuse trust is not a one-size-fits-all document. It can be, and probably should be, uniquely tailored to your beneficiary. I want to thank you for joining me in this video. If you like this content, please let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode.